You are listening to Beyond the Verse, a Star Citizen podcast. A show dedicated to Cloud Imperium games, Star Citizen, and Squadron 42. Whether you fight, explore, unite, and or trade, we bring you news, updates, interviews, reviews, and analysis. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a pour of Radegast, and join us as we go Beyond the Verse.
Launch sequence activated.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Beyond the Verse Star Citizen podcast with your host, Solus, and we are blessed today with Paul from the Astro Historian to bring you episode 8, which we are entitling Invictus. Paul, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a true blessing having you on. You've paved the way, and we'll get into a little bit of this, like the 6 years you've been doing this. You are all lore. You have really brought us some of these gold nuggets on why we play Star Citizen. So one, thank you for that. Thanks for paving the way. I hope to follow in your footsteps, but I look forward to today's conversation, brother.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it sounds good. It's been fun, and I managed to pick up some of your videos and some of the podcasts early. Some YouTube blessed me with throwing some my way, and I'm like, this person is doing content on lore. Yeah. I must reach out to them because
absolutely.
For as long as I've been doing this, sometimes I'm often the only person talking about lore, and so when I hear somebody's like, Paul, I'd like to do some lore stuff, but Paul doesn't. I'm like, no, please. I feel like the crazy man in the wilderness calling out, being like, listen to the lore. It's like, yeah, but I don't want to step on your toes. It's like, no, dude, step on my toes, please. Absolutely. Step on it. Hard.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, the more people we get into the conversation, right, the more the lore gets obviously brought up, and the more it gets discussed. Clearly, but there's so much here, and I've said it before in a couple of shows, but I'll say it again. People have told me that why talk about lore? The game's not launched yet. It's been in production for a decade. Why discuss something that might change? And I think that's like the blessing and the curse of talking about lore. Yeah, it might change. It absolutely might change. But what better platform or what better subject matter to discuss than this when, hey, remember last year when it was XYZ, now it's something completely different. Let's dive into it. Let's dive into the why. What does it mean to the development? What does it mean to production and editorial, marketing, etc.? There's a lot to unpack when it comes to lore beyond just the story being told.
Well, yeah, and the other thing that a lot of people don't like to admit is that every story is being told. Every IP you've ever followed, Star Wars, Star Trek, just any science fiction, fantasy, drama, it doesn't matter. Even if that IP has been around for decades, a century, it can still be changed because it often does get changed. Because new things need to be added. So changing to lore is not anything new for any story, especially as a story that's evolving in Star Citizen. But absolutely, the core features will always be there in Star Citizen, and some of those core features, those themes, are always very important to dive into when you're trying to examine what the game will be, because lore and gameplay are so intertwined in some cases. So absolutely,
yeah. It's for me, it's the why we play, right? Like it's one thing to get out there in PvP and I don't know, fight and go on the ground and have ground warfare. Like, all that's great. You can play Call of Duty if you wanted to. But it's the story of Star Citizen that really brings the value, in my opinion, to something that's so sandboxed, something that is so open world. So quickly, let's talk about previously Beyond the Verse. Again, for those of you all first-time listeners, first-time viewers, this is episode 8. So in the first 7 episodes, we cover today's date, like literally real time, all the way to the 29th century. So we last left off at 2800 with the peace treaty of the Ark. And so what we do is we discuss news, all that fun stuff, so that you don't necessarily have to dive into, I'm holding this up, but like 13 pages of Squadron 42 notes. I'm doing it for you. But we're also talking about this 800 years of lore between 2023 and 2953. So we last left off at the Ark. We're going to take a break from that. We're going to get into Invictus. Obviously, at the end of this month is the Invictus launch week, and that is what me and Paul, Astro Historian, are going to be talking about today. But if you are interested, episode 7, we talked about the latest jump point, with the rebuilding of Loreville, an Anvil Aerospace special, a Bengal carrier drop, a pyrotechnic amalgamated lore drop. We discussed 319, 320. We talked Jumptown 2.1, subscriber flare, roadmap roundup. We went into the Inside Star Citizen, and then, like I said, we discussed all the peace activity in the lore that happened in the 28th century. So, like I said, we unpack a lot in this show, and we do so within an hour. So it's a lot, and we move fast, and we move hot and heavy. Let's talk about this week in Beyond the Verse. So we did have on Monday, we had This Week in Star Citizen that dropped. We'll go quickly through that. On Tuesday, we had the Whitley's Guide, the Misk Prospector, which that's way too much lore. Between you and me, Paul, way too much lore. It's like 3 pages worth of a backstory.
Yeah. I'm actually doing a video on it for this weekend, so I've been looking through it. It's and it even I'm gonna even make it even more. There's more to this, because this touches on other aspects of the lore that have been written in the past, and so it all kind of dovetails and fishes in together. So it's even longer than 3 pages. So.
I can't wait. That is all you, brother. I'm gonna watch you dive into it.
That's my albatross to carry at this point. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great ship, and actually, all joking aside, it actually is a really interesting story. And just a quick example, for one ship, they take 3 pages to discuss how they rolled it out. Like, again, you can't tell me there's no lore. It's 3 pages. I'm holding it up right now. There's 3 pages of who launched and in what order it launched. So we'll get into that here in a second. Just crazy amount of lore. On Wednesday, there was a Squadron 42 monthly report. Again, like 9 pages worth of data to mine. I'm going to go through it in like 10 seconds. You'll love me. And then this morning, or actually this afternoon, we had Inside Star Citizen, which discussed the upcoming diverse settlements, and actually had like an Easter egg. I don't know if you caught this, Paul, but at the end of that video, they talked about the Mirai. They talked about the special like edition of Misk. Mm-hmm. So we'll get into that. But before we do, Paul, I want to learn about you, brother, and I'm sure everybody else who's listening wants to learn about you. So. Do a quick bio. Who are you? As if no one already knows. But who are you? What have you been doing in the last 6 years? Let's learn.
My name is Paul, Berserker 01 Batman Shelley. I run two series, the Astro Pub and the Astro Historian. For the longest time, I ran just the Astro Pub. I'm a Twitch partner. I've been a partner on Twitch for 7 years now, and I became a YouTube partner shortly after that. I've been following and doing Star Citizen before that channel. I actually ran an old channel called Berserker 01, which is where the Berserker 01 comes from, which had been streaming and playing Star Citizen since 2015. So, and I actually backed the project back in 2014. So, 2013. 2013. It was the year, the August of 2013 when the Hangar modules first dropped is when I first backed. So I've been around this project for a while.
Yeah.
I've been ever since 2017. I've been making lore videos, covering Star Citizen. I've done other games. I've actually covered Cyberpunk, and I've also covered Starfield, which is coming out. So I do stray away here and there into other properties that I think people who play Star Citizen might play or enjoy. So to kind of get some of the background for those, which are always fascinating.
Absolutely.
But my day job is a teacher, a history teacher. So that's why I call myself the Astro Historian. I actually do have a degree in history.
Shocker.
I've been teaching for over 10 years, 12 years now, I think, in secondary schools. I've been a research assistant multiple times for historians and for professors and such. So I've immersed myself in history, and part of what I like to do is to look into the fake history of video games and other properties, because I think it's fascinating how writers write those things. So.
Absolutely. Well, let me be a little cheesy for a couple seconds and just say thank you for what you do. I think teachers are some of the most underrated professions in what y'all do for our kids. I have a 7-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter, and I extremely value the teachers that pave the way. So thank you for what you do as a teacher. So.
Thank you for being a parent. I don't that way I don't have to just constantly be there for these children. Yeah. So I love teaching. It's a job that I've liked to do, and I do it because I like the kids, and so I do. Thank you, but also,
absolutely. I got you.
It's always good to have good parents who are teaching their kids about right and wrong, and also getting them involved in Star Citizen so they can be your shipmates and gunners.
Well, wasn't that why we're spending money? Is for the kids, right?
Because it's
not going to launch in my lifetime.
What's the old saying where you plant a tree, you'll never see the shade under? That's what Star Citizen is. That's the whole purpose of Star Citizen. Our grandchildren will play this game. That old joke.
That's what it's feeling like. When somebody asks me about lifetime insurance, I'm like, well, LTI is more for my kids than it is for me. So unfortunately, that's how I view it. So okay, so you first became a backer 2016? Is that what I heard? Is that what I heard?
2013.
2013. Man, even more. Wow.
During the hangar module, back when we just had the hangar.
Yeah, where is that at? Why can't we have that back? Where?
I don't know.
I want the hangers
Jared.
back.
Maybe it's Jared's fault. Maybe it's Disco's fault.
Well, now hold on.
We all want the hangers back.
Hold on. I read your comments on YouTube. Don't you have the solutions directly? I thought you.
Oh yeah. Yes. Apparently YouTube comments have decided that I am CIG from my videos. So you have given me power, and this is power I will abuse. Thank you, YouTube, for giving me this power.
Yeah.
To develop Star Citizen. Now none of you are getting any of your ships. They're all from me. But you will get pizza. All right, in-game pizza will be your recompense.
There you go. Yeah, if you could just text Chris and please make that happen. I appreciate it.
I got to call up Buster. She's the one who has the direct line to Chris Roberts.
There you go. Well, there's many different directions I could take, I guess, kind of getting to know you, Paul. But I think the first one, 2013. So what's been your favorite release up to this point? Man, you've seen it all. It feels like you've seen it all. So what's been kind of the groundbreaker, the thing that you would brag to your friends and family about?
Okay. So this is hard to explain because I don't have the exact. I'm terrible with the. I've been around for so long that numbers just fly through. So like I couldn't tell you the difference between 3.3 and 3.7 or 3.12 because those are just numbers to me. So I don't really know the full date of this. I know it was in the winter and then into the November, October through November, December to about January, February of a year. I think it was 2017 to 2018, but it was the patch where the original Jump Town was happening.
Oh yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, this is a little bit of also lore stuff.
Yeah.
Jump Town was an event where CIG put one too many zeros behind the commodity of Widow. And I'm serious. It was just like 1 0. Like they misplaced a decimal point, and it made Widow trading the most lucrative thing in the game. Nothing else could compare to it. The problem was that there was no Armistice Zone around Jump Town. There was no location. You had to know where it was.
Yeah.
And the only place you could sell it was at Grimhex. So you could fly. But luckily, you could fly from Grimhex to Jump Town. But you had to slow boat it, so there was no quantuming.
Nice.
So you could get it intercepted along the way. And because it was illegal and everything you were doing was illegal, it was this gigantic drug war where people, over several months, people were fighting over this location in this organic fight where you would go in, you'd pay for your Widow, and you'd leave. Sometimes people would form orderly queues. Usually people would show up and just start killing people because they wanted to, that's what they wanted to do.
Yep.
But it worked in this kind of natural gathering point. And it was so powerful. It was bringing people from outside the community to play the game. And we're talking about Star Citizen, which was much worse back then than it is today.
Yeah.
And in terms of like gameplay and quality, we had, I don't think we even had 30 FPS average back then. That's how long ago it was. But I was seeing big name YouTubers and Twitch streamers coming on and trying it because of this just kind of organic event that had happened. And CIG thought it was so impactful that they actually canonized the events of Jumptown. So Jumptown is in lore. All of the actions that people did at Jumptown is canon. And then that's the reason why we have Jumptown event today. It's actually entirely based off of the Jumptown accident that was the one that happened. And I was so enamored with it when it became part of the lore. Is that one of my biggest projects I've done is an entire documentary where I took actual accounts from people who were at Jumptown during that initial event, and made a documentary about it like an in-fiction documentary almost about the events of Jumptown. I based it heavily off of like the old Ken Burns documentaries.
Oh yeah,
and it's it's still one of my most proud achievements, but it's doing okay. It's doing okay, but it's like it's an honest. It was really cool because CIG actually reached out to me when they brought Jumptown back and said, "Can we use your video? Can we use your video as part of our announcement?" So people who to understand what Jumptown was, who don't know about it. So I don't think they do that anymore, but it was in the first couple of ones. So it was nice.
Well, I mean, in the first 19 minutes, you've already proven your value. I had no idea. I had no idea, brother. Maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, when Widow, the actual lore drop, the article, when that dropped a couple of weeks ago, we did a whole like deep dive on it and talked about Widow and the fact that commodity was so cheap. I didn't realize it was a real life error. And they just hey, screw it, let's just make it part of the lore. It was a fantastic addition, and well, very cool, man, very cool. So then is it safe to assume that your default or where you would call home is Crusader, or would you call another planet system like your home? Where would you choose?
I've always thought that my home system is Magnus, especially Borea. So which is the home of not Crusader, home of Drake Interplanetary.
Got it.
So they got this kind of rugged, always was the frontier town. It's always going to be a frontier town, sort of, get up and go sort of attitude. And I always like they're in the Empire, but they really don't like being in the Empire. So they always just like to buck the trends and such. So I like that attitude. And I figured it's a nice one. And it also so happens to have a jump point to Stanton. So it's hopefully one of the first ones we're going to get after Pyro. So we'll see.
Well, I like your answer, because I wasn't even thinking of that. Like I was thinking the 4 general ones that you select when you log into the game, like Microtech and Orison. So that's interesting. I have defaulted just to respond to that. I have started in like Area 18, but every time I've had the chance to reset, I've tried something different, yet I always default back to Area 18. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I think it's because of maybe like the stores, like the equipment and the weapon systems are so close to your spawn point that you can get up and go and move quickly. And obviously I love Agini Point. It's, a pretty useful spaceport. But yeah, I didn't even think about anything that's in canon, anything that's outside of what's playable.
Area 18 tends to be my home right too, just because it's the most usable, it's the most recent, and it feels the most lived in. It feels like one of those places that once it gets its real overhaul and touch up and glow up, I feel like Area 18 is going to feel like the Los Angeles from Blade Runner, or
absolutely,
or any other sort of like big sci-fi cyberpunk city, where it's this kind of bustling town of of different cultures and people bumping around with each other, but super tightly packed with this massive cityscape, the Coruscant experience, whatever. So.
Oh man, nice pull. Nice pull. Star Wars. Quickly, my son again, he's 7 years old. He told me yesterday, he's like, "Hey Dad, I would really like to watch Star Wars." And I'm like, "Oh, you mean like the Clone Wars cartoon?" And he's like, "No, Dad, I want to watch the original." I'm like, "Yes, it's happening."
That is always a good time when your child finally goes, "I'd like to know the entire experience," and just like,
start me from the beginning.
Yes. You've learned well. Come with me. You're about to what's that there's that meme from from Malcolm in the Middle, where the dad's like, you can't go back from this son.
Yeah.
Once you've learned these secrets, you can't unlearn them.
No turning back.
There's no turning back from here.
There's only like 40 years worth of Star Wars lore to unpack there, but this is not a Star Wars podcast. But yeah, that was a very special moment. I'm like, all right, Friday night, it's pizza and Star Wars. So New Hope, let's go.
Nice.
Anyways, I digress. All right, hey, so next question. When you obviously are not like spawning into Berea, but whenever you do get into game, what would be your like preferred play style? Are you like a run and gun? Do you like delivering box missions? Do you like doing trade? Like what's your shtick in game right now?
I find needs that are met. There are demands out there that need to be met, that are the legitimate gameplay, I'm telling you, legitimate. There's nothing illegal about this trade. I'm simply meeting the needs of the people. I usually do smuggling missions. So I tend to do a lot of trading, especially since CIG really brought smuggling back. That tends to be my forte. That's where the whole Magnus thing comes in. It's just like I'm just meeting the needs of the people, man. There's a market, I'm meeting it. That's
it. Yeah. You provide me the loop, I'm going to take advantage of that loop. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me ask you this. This is not in our show notes, so bear with me here. But last week, we talked about the 320 potential of ship trespass. How do you think ship trespassing will impact like smuggling, piracy, sneaking on board someone's ship? Like what are your initial thoughts on ship trespassing?
I like the fact, partially, because one of the things they did was they're going to remove the ability for you to see everyone in a local VoIP, which is nice, so it's easier to trace. But now it's also, a lot harder. So if you want to try to like smuggle yourself on board or sneak on board, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Yeah. One thing I did like from that, which was from a monthly report last month or a month before, they mentioned that they were doing, they have to do a specific law update for when you throw somebody out an airlock, and they're calling it the defenestration gameplay. Okay. Which is like they said, seriously, this is their defenestration update. When you throw somebody out a window, we need to have a law for that. So if you're throwing somebody out a window, is it illegal or not? If they're a trespasser on your ship, when you throw them out into deep space and it kills them, are you charged with a crime because they died in deep space, not on your ship? Right. So that was the like kind of thing that they're trying to figure out. Like, we have to figure this out. Where does the crime actually happen for the legality purposes?
That's really good. Yeah, that's a really good topic. Because how would you track that? But yeah, I figured that's a lot of that's going to be happening in our near future. So with drugs smuggling, I'm going to take a guess here, and you can tell me I'm wrong and tell me I'm stupid, but would the Mercury Star Runner be one of your favorite ships, or what would be your favorite smuggling ship? Yeah.
Right now, strangely enough, it's the 315P.
Interesting. Pathfinder.
It's the same reason why, old moonshiners and bootleggers would soup up old cars, hot rods, and then just race them down the highways to try to get from point A to point B to get away from the law. Yeah. Because it's fast. It's really fast. It holds just enough cargo that you need, because usually when you're smuggling stuff, you're never going to get more than 6 to 12 units of any particular cargo in because it just doesn't refresh well. It's enough. Yeah. It's very fuel efficient. It is. And it has a bed. So it's got most of the things you need for moving around.
And you can customize it and make it, So by the way, for those of you who might not know, this is the Origin 300 series. What's really like sexy about the Origin 300 series is like when you buy it, you have the ability to go and customize it. And this is the first in my gaming experience, and I have 30 plus years of experience gaming. This is the first time I've experienced going into like a URL, like a website, and being able to edit something, like customize your ship, and it reflect in game. So what Paul is referencing is like the 315 Pathfinder P is their version of like long distance travel exploration. But it's great. It's good for box missions. It's got a garage to put boxes. You can walk up there, and it's got this, I guess, cockpit, if you want to call it that, but it's got a bed to sleep in. It's a phenomenal ship. But it's cool that you can edit it, like, again, through a website, and it's going to be yours, man. Like color schemes and different alarm clocks, which actually tells the correct UTC time. Very awesome. So it's just phenomenal. It's a phenomenal ship, Paul.
And yeah, and the advantage is that in the future, that customization is supposed to also end up in game as well. So when you're purchasing the ship in game, you'll be able to use the same tool. That was their first implementation of it. So which is hopefully it'll go further. But yeah, it's very nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, the MSR, and I don't know if it's like the secret compartments that really gets me going. But like if I talk,
it's the Millennium Falcon. It's the Millennium Falcon.
It is.
Like,
yeah, that's fair. There's another Star Wars pool, but yes.
Yeah, and I love it too. It just right now it's super big. So like for the kind of gameplay we have, it just doesn't work. But like in the future, when you're going when I'm going to Pyro to pick up stuff and come back, I want the Millennium Falcon with me to get from point A to point B.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the MSR, again, if you're unfamiliar, the MSR does have a secret like underground. I don't know, but like a walkable cargo space.
Yeah, it's like Jeffrey's tubes from Star Trek.
Yeah,
it's like a ventilation system, but it's for the servers. So.
Yes. Yeah, and it definitely feels like the Millennium Falcon, but you can go through the entire ship and basically smuggle people or drugs or data. It's like the ultimate smuggler ship. So for me personally, it's the MSR for that conversation. But I guess my last question before we get into like Invictus and the really awesome points to this podcast. What are you most excited about between now and, I'm going to say launch. Let's not get into that conversation, but launch. Between now and quote unquote. Yes. Between now and quote unquote launch, what excites you? What gets you motivated with Star Citizen?
I've always said that the thing that makes Star Citizen a success for me is being able to log into the game, get it with a bunch of friends, go fly around in space, do missions, make some money, have some fun, do some stupid stuff. Like the whole experience being playable and repeatable, and having those moments of just, like, man, this is awesome. I've had those experiences in games like Arma and in survival games and in other space games. So it would be nice to have that sort of moment again in Star Citizen, where you can just sit there and go, man, this was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I was scared, or that was stupid. Those sorts of moments. And we're getting closer and closer to that. And I think sometime after the multi-crew gameplay comes out, I think that's really what I'm looking forward to, is the multi-crew gameplay, for me to yell down and be like, fix my ship, and my engineer to run around and be like, I'm trying,
No. No, that's right. And I think what's interesting about that, whether it's deliberate or accidental, it's all player driven. So the cool moments, that you and I are referencing, it's really like what you and your friends make it. It's not like there's a loop or something driving this amazing story. It's something happened, whether it's Jump Town or whether it is, oh crap, what was the event that happened a couple days ago?
Xenothreat.
Yeah. But this, like, okay, yes, we have a story that's pulling us into one central location, but what happens there, who freaking knows? It might be planned, it might not be planned. You might be pulling out a pistol in space while you're flying EVA, trying to make something happen. But those are the stories, man. Those are the stories. So I definitely can relate to that, for sure. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and go quickly, because we are 30 minutes into the call, or to the podcast. No, this is perfect. We are 30 minutes into the podcast, so I want to go quickly through this week and Beyond the Verse and Star Citizen, and then I do want to give us ample time to talk about Invictus. So just quickly, and Paul, I welcome you to inject any other colorful commentary if you want to. But on Tuesday, lore post. So Whitley's Guide, the MIC Prospector, again, 3 pages worth of data. I think for me personally, highlights, and then I would love to hear from you. So 2910 is whenever they first began, and it was based off the Freelancer, so MISC Freelancer. they began this project to see what other variances of the freelancer they can do. So they had like a data mining called the free miner. They had a military one called the observer, and then they had a mining one that they eventually called the prospector. But that all happened or started in 2910. They did trials in 2923. They launched it during IAE in 2924. And what we fly is the latest variation that came out in 2947. So this is the one with all the updated mining tools and extractors and the cargo bags. But outside of the lore, quickly, if you're interested, the prospector in mining is kind of like the vulture in salvage. So I would say those are probably the same. It's kind of this smaller volume worth of pulling minerals or pulling substance. Mining has the mole. There's not an equivalent. There's not like a medium in salvage yet. So I don't think there's like a mole equivalent. But then the Orion is your heavy mining, whereas the Reclaimer would be like your heavy salvage. So there's kind of this correlation between the two. But Paul, any reaction to the this week's MISC prospector data?
So they this is one of those things where they often pull these ideas. They have these ideas in Jump Point, which is a paid magazine. You have to pay for to get it, and then they release them later for free. And the cool thing was, like, CIG always gives a reason for these ships to exist. Like, for instance, the Vulture only exists because of a massive discovery of an ancient vessel which was thought to be lost by a Reclaimer crew, and they became billionaires overnight because of the find. And so they said, hey, we've got this old salvage ship we tried to make a while ago, let's put it up, and that became the Vulture. And this is very similar. Like, MISC releases the Prospector, it doesn't do very well, but then they find this huge load. It was what was it? The Chessex load, which is a massive discovery on Farron 2, which was thought to have completely been out of minerals, that broke the news, and all of a sudden more people were interested in mining, because now these, hey, you could do it too. If you're just a lone miner out there, you might be able to hit the mother lode and make all your money, which makes sense. It's the reason why we see so many. It's why they sell pretty well, is because they're selling the dream of mining, of like being out there and making it big. So it's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into like the future of MISC. There was like this awesome drop about the Murray, which we'll get into in a little bit. But MISC, I've warmed up to them, or MISC. I've warmed up to them. I initially hated them. The Reliant, man, the freaking Reliant just pisses me off. I don't like anything about it.
Ironically, the Reliant is named after, I believe, the Reliant Robin, which is a notoriously terrible car made by, I believe it was a British company. I have to look it up. But
classic.
But the Top Gear did a whole thing on them. It was a 3-wheeled vehicle that was just constantly tipping over and such like that. It was made in England, in Tamworth, England. Yeah. And when they named it, I'm like, you realize you just doomed this ship. Everyone's going to hate this shit because it's just a Reliant Robin, and it feels like that, like where you just constantly get hit in the windows and the wings and it blows up. So yeah, I don't blame you for looking at the Reliant and be like, this is trash.
Yes. Why would I want this? What's funny is I've always defaulted to Origin. I don't know. It's like the Tesla of spaceships. It's nice. It's luxurious. It has the most, in my opinion, like versatility. The 890 jump is freaking sexy. So like you take that and you compare it to like MISC or Drake, some of these like industrial kind of like broken down skeletons. I'm like, I can't do it. I don't know, man. I'm sorry, Paul. I can't.
Solus, there's another reason why you're probably drawn to Origin.
Uh-oh.
Their headquarters is on Terra, and it's called New Austin.
There it is.
So it's New Austin Terra. So it's an Austin company. And whenever they do whenever they do a Citizen Con in Austin, they always say that the lore is they were doing it live in New Austin Terra. So it's like, that's just it. So it's Origin Town, baby.
Love it. Yep. For all of you listening or watching on YouTube, both me and Paul are from Austin, Texas. So cool little plug there.
Yeah.
We survived the ice storm from a couple days ago, so we're brothers already.
Yes.
Unbreakable bond through the ice storm.
Nearly dying is always good.
Yeah, that's from a true Texan. Ice almost killed us. Okay. Wednesday, Squadron 42 monthly report. Again, guys, there's 9 pages. And I'm not going to go through all 9 pages, but the things that stood out to me, in AI content, development of the Fight Club, you got me. You put those 2 words together, I'm in. So Fight Club and character locomotion continued. There's bouncer animations for the club entrance. Let's go. I want to know where this is. I want to know where it's at. I'm probably going to hang out there in Squadron 42. And quickly, Paul, I'm just going to go through all of this, and then if you have any responses to the 9 pages, by all means. Another reference to the 4-legged creatures that players can pet. So it looks like there's going to be animals and pets that you can play around with, which, I mean, you can't ever say no to that. I know Galactica is going to be excited about that.
Wait, did they say you could finally pet the dog?
With the team creating a 4-legged creature that players can pet. That's what it said.
They mentioned a dog. They mentioned a dog in the last Squadron 42 episode, so it's like confirmed that you can pet the dog in Squadron 42.
There you go.
That's the important part. So
money. Well, they did say a 4-legged creature. Come on, guys. Like let's just call it out. Let's call it out. It's a dog.
It's a space dog. All right. It doesn't care. I don't care what it is. It's a space dog.
Yeah, you can't pet a cat. Cats are worthless. All right. All right. The physics team added winch support and rope system. So this is actually, I want to call this out to Tree. So Tree, if you're watching, Tree, if you're listening, this is something that he called out on social media, and this drew my attention to this. But the physics team added winch support to the rope system, which allows them to switch between fixed and pulley attachments. What in the world are they trying to accomplish there? I mean, I get the physics of it, right? But like, what play loop is going to involve a pulley system?
I have tinfoil hat theories.
Let's go.
This is something they have been talking about, the winch and pulley system for a year.
Yeah.
They've been talking about rope. They've been talking about winches and pulleys.
Yeah.
And this, at some point they mentioned on, I think, one of the Star Citizen Lives where Jared said, just because we're doing beams doesn't mean we're not doing other things. So my theory is, straight up, we're going to see rope puzzles in Squadron 42.
Interesting.
Like, where you're going to have to move ropes up with like little things so you can do like platforming and moving around and such.
Okay.
So, which is the only reason why they would do such an overhaul of the movement system that they've been doing and like EVA system. So it's a little bit, because right now platforming is, I'm gonna try to be as charitable as I can. Platforming is terrible in Star Citizen right now, but they make you do it all the time. If you want to escape prison, if you want to do a lot of like exploration of old wrecks and sites, you have to do like clambers and jumps and such.
Yeah,
and it's not that good. It's not that good.
It's not.
So the fact that they're doing this, that's what tells me, is that they're trying to get everything in for a decent stuff. So get ready for Squadron 42, the apparently platformer that's gonna come out.
I believe like Assassin's Creed or something like
like Mirror's Edge, where you're doing like wall running across the way for space or something like that.
Yeah. And maybe Portals is more of a scientific, more of a science way of approaching that. But okay, all right, I can see that. For me and Tree, like, so we're both military, we're both veterans. We immediately thought, like, dude, let's bring on Pathfinder and air assault operations. Let's go. Oh, let's go.
I would love for fast roping in this game, or underslinging, because that sounds absolutely terrifying.
Yep.
And also funny.
Yes, it'd be hilarious.
Let's see what we can undersling. If we can undersling this giant armored vehicle where we need to go,
and then imagine
watch your ship explode.
Exactly. And then what you do with the ship afterwards. I mean, that's half the fun. Yes. All right, moving quickly. Vehicles, the features in vehicle. I have the multi-function display systems now, supports comm calls, the heads-up display, and development of in-game markers. So just as you're flying, just maturing their user interface whenever you are flying your ship. I think that's all I have for that. Oh, there's also a quote in here about managing wingmen correctly, and I think that's controlling your NPCs is going to be a huge thing. And I guess, Paul, I would love to learn your opinions or feelings about this, but do you think that NPC control management will be a thing in Star Citizen?
Yes, to a limited degree, but I think
limited degree.
Okay. It'll probably use the same wingman system. If you've played Chris Roberts' earlier games, Wing Commander,
Yeah.
controlling your wingmen and ordering your wingmen was a heavy part of the game.
Yeah.
So we're going to see that obviously in Squadron, and probably see some of it in Star Citizen.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to point out as well is
Please.
something they've been talking about a lot, which is control surfaces.
Okay.
So they're now for those of you who don't know, control surfaces are the surfaces on planes that allows them to maneuver in atmospheres. And some ships do have control surfaces, like the Avenger and the Hornet and the Gladius. They all have control surfaces on them, but they're not usable. They've been trying to make them usable in the game so that you don't have to use as much thrusters to kind of keep yourself aerodynamic.
Yeah.
And last month they said they've turned control surfaces on for the autopilot so that you can now use less thruster fuel to stay airborne, and the autopilot will auto adjust your course if you're trying to go in a certain degree.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an interesting factor. So
very interesting. Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. Man, I'm looking at the time. We might, you know what? I'm going to go and call it. We are going to go until 9:30 tonight. I'm going to go and add 30 minutes to our podcast.
Sorry about that. I do
great.
this. I do this to every podcast I'm on. It's like, we'll do 30 minutes. It's like it's an hour and a half later. Paul, it was supposed to be 30 minutes. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Hey, I'm not going to steal the viewer and listener from this awesome conversation. So we're going to add 30 minutes. We're going to be an hour and a half. First time in 8 episodes. So the next piece, water volume. Okay, so first off, go watch today's Inside Star Citizen. Those graphics of the derelict sites are unbelievable. They are gorgeous. The ray tracing with the sunsets and the trees moving, but the water refraction or reflection is just stunning, and that's why I wanted to highlight this piece. But the water volume fine tuning on planets, but even down to puddles. They're really trying to make this kind of a believable space. But again, if you go and watch, now granted it's white box, it's gray box, I understand. It's a work in process. But those graphics that they're putting on these videos, it's absolutely remarkable. So I wanted to highlight that. Now, I personally can't replicate that in game. I've got a great gaming PC, but man, I tell you, I don't have the ability to produce that in 4K the way they do. But it is a beautiful change or update into the graphics.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it looks fantastic, and every time they pull that out there, because they're really showing off the fact that they're moving away from the old graphics engine to Gen 12. Everything's Gen 12 now, and they're moving everything towards Vulkan. So not only will we see beautiful graphics, but soon potato PCs should be able to run Star Citizen, which is impressive.
You mean my work laptop?
Yeah, I mean, the Vulkan is black magic when it comes to being able to run things. Look up if those of you who are watching, look up Doom 2016 Vulkan and look at the Doom engine, Doom running on the original. They do kind of like a cross compatible, and they tell you that there's a bunch of videos out there that kind of show you like what Vulkan can do for a budget PC playing the game. So that game when it came out was super intensive in terms of your graphic settings, but then when they released the Vulkan support like a couple of years later, it turned it into a much more affordable. So that's what Star Citizen is probably going to do, is going from this huge beefy machine to being like your laptop might be able to run this game, which will be insane when that happens.
No kidding.
So
well, not to mention that coupled with all the tech milestones that they've been able to achieve with, containment or object containment and persistent entity streaming and all of this, like that, or server meshing, like that's going to be amazing to reproduce on like a work laptop. Now, Amazon, if you're listening, please ignore what I just said. But that's going to be incredible to experience. Quickly, let's wrap up. The notes. I'm on the last page, guys. So they're looking at user interface tech, kicked off new interior and mini maps. They've updated a complex destruction sequence, which I didn't think they need. The destruction sequence is sexy. It's beautiful to watch, like an Idris during Xenothreat explode. It's gorgeous. It's one of the most amazing things to watch in gaming, in my personal opinion. And last, weapon VX teams have launched like damage and wear and tear to your weapon system. So, man, 9 pages.
Yeah.
It's great updates. And I'll say this before I leave it over to Paul. A win in Squadron 42 is a win in Star Citizen. So these tech advances, why we discuss it here on this podcast, is those advancements that they make in this single player game is going to have a direct correlation or a direct reflection on that multiplayer experience in Star Citizen.
Oh yeah, a lot of the stuff that they talk about in Squadron 42 is only 6 to 12 months away from Star Citizen. The AI updates they've been talking about for the last year plus, which shows how complex and intricate the AI can be. The AI tag system that allows them to change up behaviors on a whim and generate them with specific amounts of ammo and weapons and the different profiles, so you never get bored, because they want to make Squadron 42 a dynamic experience where no two playthroughs are exactly the same. That stuff is going to be transported into the Star Citizen. They just need like server meshing to be working. So a lot of the stuff, I always say, especially if you're a fan of Squadron 42 and you really want to see it come out, that read the monthly reports. They have just a lot of insight in what they can do. Like for instance, the narrative team just what was the narrative team? I think it was the Gameplay Story. Gameplay Story said that they progressed with minor updates across a wide range of scenes, including updating 20 scenes with either new pages, props, updates, start and end times, or general polish and maintenance. Yeah. And apparently this was a considerable body of work and accomplished it with so many updates. So a lot of stuff is being updated with Squadron 42. So it seems like it's moving in that direction of getting to an end zone. There's a light at the end of the tunnel that they're getting to. So.
It might be a long ways away, but that light is there. And it is at the end of the tunnel. One of the things, and I'm trying to remember like where I read it, but one of the things that I'm excited about with the narrative team is that they plan on telling a lot of their story through like not dialogue, not like pre-constructed narrative, but they're talking about, putting Galactopedia inside the game, putting a lot of the story in like Crusaders. You're walking around, there's signage and there's there's announcements on the PA system. Like these are the ways that they're going to announce or tell the story. And like that to me, like I think Cyberpunk did that a little bit, if I can remember my time playing. Like I think they did a lot of like that dialogue that's kind of sidebar dialogue to tell the story. But I'm excited about that as well. With as much lore as this game does have, the way they're telling it, whether it's somebody in a college classroom reading a textbook about something, which we've talked about in the last 8 episodes, right? But like there's just different ways of telling the story, and that's a breath of fresh air. I come back 6 years ago when you were starting this, Paul. 6 years ago, I was doing the Lore Seekers with Elder Scrolls Online, and it's the same. It's the same method. You have like some deity that's telling a story within a book. Okay, cool. Next book, right? You move on. But this is such an interesting way of telling that dialogue. So I digress. Maybe a sidebar, but I think the narrative team is onto something. It's unique.
Oh, yeah. I think when they get things like NPCs having conversations in Star Citizen, just being like, complaining about, shipment dates are late because of stupid pirate attacks around the jump point, or complaining about having the long work hours, and someone being like, "Have you heard of the Hurston Resource Union? You want to join us and fight the fight?" Those sorts of things. Those little side bits where if you listen in, you catch up. You're like, "Oh, these people have lives. There's things that are going on other than me."
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest problem I've always had with MMOs. And I think Chris Roberts has even said that that's his big problem with MMOs, is that it feels so static. It feels like you are playing a single player game with just other people around you.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to sit down and talk with the narrative director for Star Citizen. And he said very, very plainly, like, our goal is to not tell the story through static dialogue and text boxes.
Love it.
But through the dynamic universe, and see through other people's eyes, and bits and pieces here, where you're in a universe, not the hero of the Imperium kind of thing. You are just you're just a pilot in Squad 40. You're just an independent contractor in Star Citizen, and you're just there. So.
That's so interesting you put it that way. because like it's one thing to play like I don't know what's the latest Star Wars, like the Jedi,
Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah. Like you can play the
Survivor, Jedi Survivor,
yeah. You can play like the hero, the story, and that's the very typical. But I welcome a game that does that. I welcome a game that just makes me a number. I'm okay with that. Like I want to be a citizen in this universe, not to play on words, but all right. Let's wrap this up. So
let's move forward.
All right. So earlier this morning or earlier this afternoon, Inside Star Citizen, we did have the YouTube video. Again, we mentioned it a couple minutes ago. Go watch it. It's a beautiful, beautiful video of like the 15 current diverse settlements they're in and around the Stanton system, but how they're projecting the future settlements to look and how it's going to interact with the worlds and how it's able to exponentially grow within the planet system. So please go watch it. It's great. I recommend anything development related because it's just going to help build context and maybe increase your patience, my patience included, on waiting for this game to launch. So what I do want to call out, and then I'll throw it over to Paul. At the very end, they did do like a sneak peek on the Mirai. So go watch it. Go watch the little like Mirai thing. But not to like spoil it, but if you're familiar with Ford, the vehicle in the United States, like the Ford company, they have a performance line called SVT, the Special Vehicle Team. This is what Mirai is. It is the Special Vehicle Team of MISC. And so they're promising this performance package, this a racing package or a military package that's going to be above and beyond what they provide for just like your common purchaser. And so there's a good video on where it's going. They do mention, sort of at the very end, they mention the Fury. So I think we can surmise that in Invictus launch week, we're going to see the Mirai Fury. So stand by on that. But it was just a really cool, and they do this all the time, guys. They do this all the time. They drop little Easter eggs, here and there for us to pick up on. But Paul, any reactions to today's Inside Star Citizen if you were able to watch it? Anything on the diverse settlements or anything on the Mirai? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm interested in seeing what the settlements come to, because they mentioned them as hostile settlements, but also friendly settlements. So we could see settlements that you have missions at, or mission givers, or places you can go trade goods, which is an interesting kind of adding more to the universe. Because right now, everything that's not just a landing zone is either just kind of a carbon copy, like outpost where you don't see anybody walking around other than players landing and taking off. So there's not really a lot of life in those places. So this sounds like they're trying to move towards that. This is people live in this area. They don't just live in Lorville or in Orison. They live in these small locations, these beaten down locations where they maybe just used what they had and built little small areas. I'm also sort of interested because there's a mystery I'm trying to unsolve and unravel, which is what happened to the original settlers of Stanton. Because just as a quick aside, there were people in Stanton before the UEE found it. And they removed them. And so it's like, where did they go? And are they still around? Did they come back after the UEE had settled it? Are some of these outlaw gangs or some of these places where these people pulled these things together, maybe they're descendants of the original settlers from Stanton? And so it's really interesting to be like, what happened to these people? And so this may be tying into that.
I would love that. Yeah, I think it'd be a good place for drug smuggling, because like right now when you go to Jump Town, you take the drugs and you take it back to like Olisar. You take it back to these spaceports and you turn them in, but like why can't you turn them into a derelict location? Like that makes sense to me. So I think you're onto something there. I agree. Like some of the future the work in progress videos that we saw in this video, they almost look like a Star Wars, like the Mandalorian, not to like plug that, but like a Mandalorian scene where it's actually a robust, like it almost looks like a community was living there. I would love to dive more into that. Like, what is this community? Where it comes from? Why are they not there when you're present? Are they always violent? Are they, civil? I think there's a lot of potential with where the story can go with this. So, I think it's interesting.
And the Fury, which they showed off in the end, or at least teased at the end, looks fantastic. The first thing I saw when I saw it was, this looks like the Red Tail from Faye Valentine ship from Cowboy Bebop. It's just like, it looks like that, like a little pod thing. I'm like, I'm down with it. Let me see more. Let me see how it works. So.
Yeah, the Fury, it's funny. It has the cockpit of the Reliant. So when I first saw it, I'm like, no, stay away from the Reliant. Like, I don't want to see some bulbous, like, thing that you have to be in. But it actually looks solid. It looks great. The, the tagging on the ship that says Mirai, it's beautiful. It's well done. It's just another thing that's going to suck my money up in the next week. So thank you, Invictus Launch Week.
Yes. So. And apparently it's one of 5. There are like 5 new ships coming in, which is that's surprising me.
It's huge.
I'd only thought about maybe 3 or 4, but that's a huge amount.
Yeah. So. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's got its own its own day. I think it's the first day of Invictus Launch Week. It's going to be the Misk and the Mirai. That's going to be doing like a joint day. Which we'll get into Invictus Launch Week, what that means here in a second. But last but not least, tomorrow. There's going to be a Star Citizen Live where they're going to go over the new player experience. So tune in to their Twitch account at 8 a.m. Pacific. And then on Saturday, System 7 is going to be doing a racing league, race number 4 called Cloud Chasers. So links will be in the bio and YouTube and in your favorite podcasting platform. So stand by on that. Without further ado, we took an entire hour leading up to the lore. So without further ado, let's get into this. Invictus, what it means, where it comes from, and where we're going. So this is nothing new to Beyond the Verse. You know that we go directly to the source. We go to Galactopedia, we go to the time capsules, and we pull the information straight from CIG. We'll read it verbatim. We'll talk about the articles, and then we will do a couple of seconds or a couple minutes of what it means to us. I love Paul's insight, as he's been doing this for 10 years. But this first article, and I think it's very important that we lay the foundation of who the Tavaran are. So we got to go back. We got to go back to the 26th century. And this, again, is straight from the Galactopedia article entitled Tavaran. Quote, "The Tavaran are bipedal beings indigenous to the planet Jalen, Elysium-4, formerly Calith. In 2541, human researcher Dr. Keller Lynch discovered a jump point into their system. At that time, the Tavaran were capable of space flight, quantum travel, and had highly developed shielding technology. Their society was martial, built around the warrior ethos of Rajora. The Tavaran attacked the United Planets of Earth, UPE, upon first contact and sparked the First Tavaran War, 2541 through 2546, which they eventually lost. Their systems were annexed to the UPE, and humans set up colony towns on the Tavaran home world." I'm going to break from this article. So if you watched episode 7, and even going back to episode 6, we talked about a two-front war. We talked about in the West, and I say that in quotation marks because there's no direction in space. Mm-hmm. But in the West, you've got the Tavaran and the Vanduul. You've got a very hostile Tavaran who, when we first made contact, clearly we just read this, they wanted territory. They are overpopulated. They want to expand. They want to take over what the UPE has. So they started the war in 2541. The Vanduul, we will learn, if we haven't already, the Vanduul, we will learn, is always going to be combative. They are our main threat. So you get that in the West, and in the East, you have kind of a confusion. You've got the Banu and you've got the Xi'an, and you don't really know where their allegiance lies. There's evidence of terrorist guerrilla warfare between the Vandal and the Xi'an technology, the Tavaran and the Xi'an technology. So you have this question of who the Xi'an is, even though we're using them in some of our technology, like in the MISC ships. But the Banu, for the most part, seem to be the most peaceful. But you have this moment in time, and this is perfect timing because we're in the 29th century in our podcast. We're in this moment in time where we think we have peace, but we really don't. In the next 100 years, we're going to see it all unravel, but it starts with this Tavaran conflict back in 2541.
And it's also important to keep into context that only a couple of years before this, maybe I think it was like 10 or 20 years, was when humans first encountered with the Xi'an, and it was not a friendly encounter.
Yes.
As you probably covered, the humans tried to terraform one of their worlds. The Xi'an were like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And captured all of them and sent one person back to negotiate. And so you had several months or weeks, I think, of the UNE fleet and the or maybe the UPE fleet at that time, and the Xi'an fleet just staring at each other, tensely negotiating what's going to happen. And part of that deal was humans giving over like the space data for all of their systems, which terrified people because it's like, we don't know who these people are. They don't want to talk to us. They're very secretive, and they want know where all of our stuff is. Yeah. You know, it's like, what? Yeah. So they were preparing for war with Xi'an well before they met the Tavaran, because they were like, this is a threat. They are the threat that we're going to have to encounter in the future. Yeah. So when they stumbled upon the Tavaran, which was on the opposite end where they were preparing conflict, that was kind of a whoops, kind of moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we learned in the overthrow of Imperator Messer the 11th, it was the visual, like it was the videos. It was the video of the death and destruction that we caused when we tried to terraform these planets. So yeah, it goes all the way back to the Tavaran. It goes all the way back, like to your points, to the Xi'an when we first started terraforming their territory. Going into the First Tavaran War, again, straight from the website, the article First Tavaran War, quote, the First Tavaran War was an intersystem conflict between the Tavaran and the UPE. The Tavaran declared war with humans in 2541, shortly after first contact. The motivations behind the war were complex. It was both a bid for the Tavaran to claim UPE-controlled territory to assuage their overpopulation problem, and a consequence of the high cultural value the Tavaran as a people placed on combat. The war was responsible for countless advances in spacecraft technology. Ivar Messer, which we'll get into here in a second, Ivar Messer, then an officer in the UPE army, was propelled to power following the Battle of Idris, a key conflict in the First Tavaran War. And eventually the Tavaran were defeated in 2546. I think this is an important article because, yes, we did start a lot of crap by terraforming other planets and other systems. We had this like feeling of righteousness where I deserve to be in the system. I'm going to terraform it. I'm going to make it oxidized. We did start a lot of issues. However, the Tavaran did have an initial hostile reaction to us being there. So the justification of going to war against the Tavaran, I think, is justified, in my personal opinion.
The Tavaran started the conflict. They
Absolutely.
Intentionally started the conflict. There's no doubt about it. It's the thing is that, for those who don't know, the Tavaran have this system of Rijora, which is this. It's kind of like a Bushido code. It's very honorable and kind of steadfast. But the thing was that the Tavaran had only been unified for maybe a decade, or maybe a couple of a handful of years. At most 100 years, Tavaran had been a unified species. Up to that point, they had been constantly fighting amongst each other. And it took the emergence of what they call the warlord, the leader of the Tavaran, I forget the name of their government, but the leader of the Tavaran people to unify the entirety of the Tavaran people. And at that point, because they were no longer just killing each other constantly, they actually had a population boom, which they didn't have space for or the resources to deal with, and they didn't have terraforming technology. So it was just like they had nowhere to go. In fact, we found a abandoned Tavaran colony in what's known as, what is it called? It's I have to look it up.
Oh, you're fine.
The blanks in my mind.
Yeah.
We found one in a world that was it's like 2 jumps away from Tavaran space, and so the question is like, was there a jump point that existed between this place and a Cabal system, the Cabal system? But it was a pre-Tavaran War, first Tavaran War location. Like the Tavaran had found this and started settling it because they didn't have terraforming technology. It was where they could live, and they abandoned it. We still don't know why. And they abandoned it, I think, before the first Tavaran War happened. So the Tavaran War, it was 100% the Tavaran started it. And the thing was is that unlike the Tavaran, humanity had effectively dumped most of its martial past by that point. We were hundreds of years past the Unification Wars. There was no more real call for a professional military. They had militias, and the most you'd have to deal with was pirates. So, humanity was speeding up because of the Dajian, but they were not ready for. So that's the reason why the Tavaran were so successful early on. It's just because they were ready to go, and humanity was just not. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of a spoiler alert. They almost had us. They almost had us, if not for the actions of Avar Messer, which we're about to get into. But they almost beat us in the West, and that would have been traumatic obviously for many reasons. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let's get into it. So the Battle of Idris the Fourth, or Idris IV, the planet system. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Battle of Idris IV was a major engagement during the First Tavaran War between human forces of the UPE and the Tavaran. It took place on 1 October 2544 on and above Idris IV. Before the battle, the UPE had been losing ground, resulting in the planet being overtaken by Tavaran forces. The tactics of a young Avar Messer ensured UPE victory at Idris IV and turned the tide of the war. This battle was key in beginning Messer's rise to power. A monument to the battle has been established on Idris IV. So the reason why I'm going this deep into the lore is because this is Invictus. This right here is Invictus launch week.
Yes.
It all has to do with Avar Messer. So if we can understand where we came from and understand Avar Messer's impact, we can then understand the Messer lineage of Imperadors and prime citizens, which we talked about last episode. And we can understand where we're currently at in 2953. So the Battle of Idris is super interesting. We'll get into the actual Avar Messer strategy in the next article. But Paul, what do you got?
So the thing to understand about Idris IV is that Idris IV was captured early in the war. It was one of the first places that humanity lost, and they abandoned it. But not everyone left. So there was a group of people who were unable to leave or just unwilling to leave, who stayed on Idris IV and literally ran to the hills. And many of these people were not soldiers. Some of them were ex-soldiers. Most of them were just people. Yeah. And their leader, whose last name was Gray, was Locke. Was her name. As she rallied them and began to do asymmetrical warfare against the Tavaran. So they would blow up communication centers and disappear into the woods before they could find them, and communicated with the UNE and the UPE. The reason why the UPE even attacked Idris is because they knew they had people on the ground who could cause chaos for the Tavaran, so that to cause distractions before they could get in there. And because it was right next to Tavaran space, it was a great place to launch off an invasion point to the Tavaran homeworld. So that's important to keep in mind. They actually called them the Greys, but the planet itself, the planet itself, Idris IV, is actually named Locke after her because of her actions during the conflict. So
that's a great pull. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and I try my best. In the last couple episodes, I've tried to relate it to real world references, and I think I think it helps to describe where the where the narrative team might be coming from and what they're trying to relate to. So like I look at the Tavaran almost like the Japanese. Like they have this art of war. They have this martial approach. And what we're going to see is this Messer character is going to be kind of the equivalent to that famous Marine photo, like United States Marines photo of like stabbing the American flag like into the ground. It's kind of that. They're going to capitalize on his heroicism, and they're going to use him as a PR asset going into the war. And so without further ado, I'm going to get into Avar Messer's article, and we're going to learn a little bit about why we celebrate Invictus Launch Week. And it's based off of Messer's actions. Quote, he was a captain in the UPE 112th Infantry Battalion. Shout out for all my infantry officers. When he distinguished himself in the First Tavaran War during Operation Nemesis and in the Battle of Idris IV, when he took command after the death of his captain and led his troops to victory. The government capitalized off his image as a brave and charismatic officer in an advertising campaign to recruit soldiers, which that is Invictus Launch Week. We'll come back to that. After the war, he utilized this to gain political influence, securing a position in the tribunal, which is the advocacy, the military, the law, and the where am I at? Military, law, and
government, or you've got the advocacy, the Senate, and the
general,
the
high general. Yeah. Okay.
The high secretary. It's the high secretary, the high advocate, and the high the high secretary. Yeah.
That's why we have you. That's why we have you here. Yeah. So the tribunal, as high general. Then he leveraged public fervor against the atrocity of Jata to create the new governmental position of prime citizen. We talked about prime citizen in the last couple episodes, so go check it out. But I'll stop there. So Messer, this statue, you'll see him on posters. You will see him very much during Invictus Launch Week. But this is Invictus Launch Week. It is the culmination, and I'll read the article here in a second. It's the culmination of a new recruiting year and the graduation ceremony of those of the previous year. So it's this military celebration that happens annually around this time to commemorate the actions of Messer during the first battle of Tavaran War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to go. I can go into detail.
Yeah.
The thing to understand about Messer is that he was not anybody.
Yeah.
He was a captain in the 112th Infantry. I think originally it was the EU. He's a European captain. But it was the 112th was dropping with the 2nd Marine Armored onto a place that they called, I think they called it the Hill. Is what they called it, because it was a airbase, basically a Tavaran airbase that they wanted to capture and then reuse for their own fighters and bombers. And initially it went well. They went in, they smashed in, they captured it pretty quickly, but then they realized they were surrounded. So the assault came in and it fell apart, because in space it started to fall apart because they didn't know that there were these giant defense lasers that were firing at them. They didn't think were ready. So the Navy was getting smashed up, and they couldn't send in any reinforcements because they would just get smashed. So the colonel died, then the major, then the captain, and it left Ivar Messer, this nobody captain from nowhere that nobody cared about. Yeah. And he immediately took control, got a couple of the special operations that were just starting to support for a group, basically a group of what we today call Marine Recon Forces. Get them, he'd said, here, we captured this skiff, go turn off those guns. And so they just left, and they went off and actually managed to do it, to turn off the orbital bombardment and turn them on the Tavaran Navy first before they left, and then spiked it and blew them all up. And it was him. He was doing things like calling round-the-clock danger close bombing missions on his position with retaliator bombers to stop the Tavarn because they were getting that close. They were charging like within inches of their front lines, which is why these leaders kept getting killed.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for him basically taking control and clearing the chaos, the battle would have been lost. That's just why he became such a hero, because he was a good leader. And what kind of turned him into a villain was more of his inability to turn off the leader, turn off the I'm a general in command of my army, and you're going to listen to me because that's what I tell you to do.
Yep.
And that whole expounded out was not it was kind of his downfall, and his preceding generations who took that to heart and weren't as good as him or as smart as him or as talented as him when it came to tactics or politics. And then we get Linton.
Yep. So. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting pool. The difference, I've always heard this, like the difference between like a ranger in direct action and a special forces operator in foreign internal defense is the ability to turn it off. Like it's one thing to like kick down doors and direct action and go, but it's the ability to also navigate the EQ side of the war or of the situation. And I think what we see here is like we've got this ranger, or to your point, a Marine recon. We have this go-getter, man. He's ready to kick down doors. He's ready to go make this happen. That works in direct action. That works in direct like conflict. But when you get into the political hemisphere of what happens in the next several years, centuries, you'll see, and if you haven't already heard, a lot of the political starts to come up. A lot of the atrocities that happen across the system. The reason why the Emperor was overthrown around the 2800 time frame is because of this inability to turn it off. So I think that's a great pull, Paul. Thank you. Which gets us into Invictus launch week. All right. Straight out of the article. Let's go.
Sorry.
Let's go.
We're finally there.
An hour and 18 minutes. Here we go. Invictus launch week, or otherwise known as Fleet Week, is an event held the last week of May that marks the beginning of a new recruiting year and graduation of the latest class of officers and pilots of the UEEN, or the United Empire of Earth Navy. It originated in, obviously, 2542 during the First Tavaran War, when the UPE Tribunal, in need of new soldiers in the face of the Tavaran invasion, sent transports from star system to star system to pick up volunteers and transport them to the UPE naval base Invictus on Mars, or Sol 4, but you all know it as Mars. It was established in as a yearly event under Imperator Ivar Messer I. We just talked about him in 2581. Today, although the Invictus base no longer exists, the event is still celebrated by the UEE Navy under the same name. Break.
Yeah.
So if you have been listening to Beyond the Verse Star Citizen podcast from like episode 1, you know that I started playing just last year. I'm about to hit my 1-year anniversary. So unlike Paul, who has like 10 years of Star Citizen like experience, I joined during this event, which it was the dumbest thing I could have done, because it's all the fanfare, it's all the sexiness that CIG could put into a game, and they unload it in 1 week. You're going to see every vehicle. You're going to see every flyby. The Bengal carrier is going to fly by. You're going to be able to tour the Javelin. It is an amazing experience. So whether you're new to the game, you're trying to decide whether or not to dabble or get into it, or if you're a seasoned veteran and you're like, hey, is now the right time to get back into it? The answer is yes. This is the time. It's either Invictus launch week or IAE that I would recommend, which is like November, which I would recommend going both feet in, going all in, experience the amazingness, the awesomeness that is Star Citizen. This is the time to do it, because you're going to see some amazing things that you're not going to see in any other game. So I'm a fanboy when it comes to Invictus launch week. They can't do any wrong. It is a very, very fun event. Paul, what are your favorite Invictus launch week experiences here?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. They've
a lot
only
of
been
them,
doing this
yeah.
for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
But the first one was amazing, seeing the fleet come out, because they brought out the Javelin for the first time, and it was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then I think it was last year. No, it was first year they actually parked the Javelin and you could tour it, and it was like, what?
Yeah.
And they had these. It's
Crazy.
great because they have the NPCs who are sitting there being like, "This is the bridge," or no, "This is the mess. This is the habitation deck. This is the gunners." They even let you get into the guns, and like look around and that kind of stuff like that. It's very authentic Fleet Week experience. If you've ever been to a Fleet Week where like the sailors will show you around the ships and try to show off like, look at how cool this is.
Yeah.
You know? And watching the fleet fly by, and then last year's the first year they brought the Bengal in, and that thing is glorious and intimidating.
Yes.
Like all I can say is that in Squadron 42, if that thing shows up at any point, you're just going to sit there going, "Oh my god!" Like you'll feel safe for like it's just one of those things when it shows up. You're just like, nothing can defeat this thing. I am safe. This is fine.
Yeah.
Everything is fine now. I don't care how bad things are. This thing is here now.
Yeah.
It is huge.
It's crazy.
So massive, and it's so cool to see. And it really is this kind of spectacle that CIG puts on of really showing off the what Star Citizen can do, what Star Citizen could be.
Yeah.
Complete with fireworks shows.
Oh, yeah.
It's space fireworks shows. It's great. It's great. It's a great little experience. Plus being able to fly and all of the ships that are in the game and for free and stuff. It's always nice. So
yeah, so let's go into that real quick. It is the best time to get into the game and the worst time to get into the game, and I'll explain it because if you have the money, you're gonna spend it. So to Paul's point, you can get every day there is a set of vendors. So Drake, Origin, MISC. I'm not going to go through all of them, but every vendor will have their day. And so what happens, and I'm not exaggerating, Paul, hold me accountable here, but they will like fly the ships into the Expo Center, which this year it's at Area 18. They'll fly the ships into Area 18 at 10 a.m. Central, and you can literally walk your happy ass into this auditorium and see every ship on display for this vendor. So if you're interested in the Mirai Fury or the Mesk Reliant, you're going to be able to see and rent for free all of those vehicles on day one. Yeah. Right, and the schedules. Go ahead, please.
Sadly, they don't land them. You don't get to see them fly and land. They do. You do get to see the transition where like they go from one day to another. You go to the other day. You go to a different floor, and you can go check out the new ships. It is literally Invictus is a little bit more restrictive than IAE. Yes, but it's every combat ship. Every combat ship you could ever want in the game is there. If it's flyable in Star Citizen, you can fly it and rent it, including tanks, which is fun. So
that's right. Yes, yeah. So this is a good time to see like what play loop interests you. If you wanted to try the MSR but didn't want to spend a dime on it, now's the time to do it. This is a week that it's going to be high velocity, and we talked about high velocity in development in one of the last episodes. It could be good and it could be bad. So if it's high velocity during like 318, I'm scared. But if it's high velocity during 319, okay, all right, we have some promise. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to keep like optimistic here, Paul. But it has the potential of being an amazing event that's going to like, again, unite, reignite a lot of the community for all the right reasons and why we play Star Citizen.
Oh, yeah.
So quickly, we have 5 minutes left. I want to kind of wrap up to get us up to where we're going to be talking next week. So again, last week we rounded up with the ARC. It's the peace treaty that happens with all alien races except for the Vanduul. So I want to take us through the Invictus launch to the 29th century. So let's talk about that real quick. And I'm going to go fast and heavy. Paul, I'd love to hear your recap, and then we can wrap this one up.
Sure.
So yes, Invictus launch week happens, Avar Messer, a hero, but we have a second Tavaran War. The Second Tavaran War was an armed conflict between the Tavaran and the UEE that lasted from 2603 to 2610 in the 27th century. It began when Krathal, a Tavaran warlord, launched a campaign to take back the Tavaran homeworld, which is Jalon Elysium 4, from the UEE. Lacking the numbers and resources from the First Tavaran War, the Tavaran waged a protracted, guerrilla-based campaign over the next 7 years. Guys, we talked about this in the last episode. This guerrilla warfare, this using the Xi'an technology to commit terrorism. This is where it comes from. When it became clear that the Tavaran were going to be defeated after the Battle of the Centauri, he and his remaining forces removed the thermal shielding from their ships and dove into the atmosphere of Jalon, which we talked about last episode. Their self-immolation prompted the Tavaran to cast off the culture that had failed them and fully assimilate into the UEE under the rule of the Deacon Messer II. Straight into the Battle of Centauri. Come with me.
All right. So
go ahead, please, Paul.
I was going to say the thing to understand about the Second Tavaran War is that everyone thought it was going to be easy. The Tavarans showed up and said, "We want our homeworld back," and the UEE said, "We already beat you once, old man. We could beat you again." And they were wrong because they came back with better technology than they'd ever seen before, and were very, very good at unhinging. And this was no longer Ivar Messer, the hero of Idris IV. It's his son.
Yes,
Deacon. Who is not a military genius, is not a military commander. He's relying on the people who he thinks knows what they're doing, and nobody really knows what they're doing. Fun fact is the Battle of Centauri, which we'll go over out here, is the battle that really made the name for Squadron 42, the title squadron.
Yes,
of the single-player game. So it's
a great segue, Paul. Thank you. It's like you've done this before. I don't know.
Maybe if you
Enter the Battle of Centauri. So this is the Squadron 42 story. This is it. Quote, "The Battle of Centauri was an armed military engagement between the Tavaran and the UEE and was the final battle of the Second Tavaran War. On 24 June 2610, that's a huge date. Write it down, get it tattooed. I don't know. 24 June 2610. The Tavaran warlord Korthal and his forces entered the Centauri system with the Centauri Elysium jump point as their goal, around which the UEE Navy had placed a blockade." This is important. "Instead of charging for the jump point, Korthal's fleet diverted for Yar and Saisei.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you.
Which is actually the headquarters of Misk. So.
Yeah, it's good pull. Good pull, man. Thank you. Forcing the UEE Navy to break its formation and defend the populace, leaving a small contingent of ships behind to protect the jump point. This is important. Captain Alexandra Dunleavy of the UEEN's 42nd Squadron, believing that this strategy would fail, convinced her commanding officer, Admiral Tybolt Fraser of the UEES Countenance, to pretend to retreat under fire from the approaching Tavaran forces. As Korthal's fleet broke formation to enter the jump point, the 42nd Squadron, Squadron 42, ambushed them and took out their shields, giving the UEEN the opportunity to destroy a majority of the Tavaran ships. While Korthal and his remaining forces did manage to break the line and enter the Elysium system, they lacked the numbers to retake it. Instead, they chose to immolate themselves in the atmosphere of their former homeworld, bringing the Second Tavaran War to an end. And so if you recall, in episode 7, we talked about really the heartbreaking story of the artist, right? The artist standing at the lake or standing at the water watching that ship go into the water and burning in flames. And I talked about the realism of like, man, when you have nothing else to lose and you're like, this is it. I can't win. We're just going to wrap this up, but at least we're going to wrap this up in our home world. It's a very, very touching, very depressing story if you think about it from that purview. But that's it. That is the Squadron 42 story of a false front or a trick of the strategy to be able to overthrow and overpower this Tavaran fleet.
The secret with Squadron 42's success was they're actually a penal squadron. So the war had been gone on for a very long time. They were losing good pilots. They couldn't take any pilot who was still able to fly, but maybe wasn't too good at following orders, so they would throw them in these penal squadrons to just say, hey, we're going to throw you some garbage duty, escort duty to behind the enemy, behind lines. We'll do things that you weren't supposed to do. If you played Ace Combat 7, that's squadron.
Nice.
Like, that's what Squadron 42 is.
Yeah.
Or was. And the thing that Dunleavy realized was that they were actually really good pilots if you didn't try to control them like pilots, like soldiers. Instead of giving them orders to do what they're supposed to do, you would give them a general command and then just let them do it on their own. So she turned this kind of rabid group of just prisoners basically into an actual pretty good fighter squadron. And by using a tactic which was just turning their ships off so that no one could see them, when their fleet disengaged and they started piling into the jump point, they just turned on their ships. And because they weren't registered on the sensors, the Tavaran didn't know they were there until it was too late, and then they could jump on them when they were no longer able to have their powerful phalanx shields on. And that's how they won the war. And and Tears of Fire is still a very, very emotional piece. Especially when you know that the guy who did that, the person in the figure itself, is actually a medic. He's an army medic. Who was watching the whole thing. So it's like, someone whose sole job is to save lives, watching just countless death in front of them without able to do anything. It's kind of powerless to do things. Is pretty powerful as well. So
yeah, it is. It is. They and this is like maybe lofty, to think about, but I would love to see this in some sort of like not like movie form, but I hope Squadron 42 or Star Citizen, I hope they somehow tell this story through like video. Like I want to see this play out. I want to see it play out because it's so beautiful. Let's wrap it up, getting us to the 30th century, and we're talking the Tavaran Purge, and then we'll be done for the night. The Tavaran Purge was a movement sparked in the immediate aftermath of the Second Tavaran War, in which the Tavaran voluntarily severed connection with their culture. This is the martial culture that we talked about. They destroyed records, denounced the Rajoran Code, which Paul talked about, tore down temples, obliterated other aspects of the civilization that had previously defined and ultimately failed them. Most Tavaran abandoned their homeworld and assimilated to the UEE. Let's fast forward until the 30th century. Beginning in the 30th century, there has been a growing movement among the Tavaran to reconnect with their former culture and language. So I'm going to leave beyond the verse there. So here we are, 30th century, which is the 2900s, which is where we are in our podcast. This plays out absolutely perfectly. But what happens now? The Vanduul weren't present during the Ark. Nope. The Tavaran are interested in getting back to their martial law. What happens in the 2900s?
You'll have to find that out. But I will say that what's his name? Senator Suj Kosi, is a fantastic figure who kind of encapsulates one aspect of Tavaran life in the 30th century, because their perspective versus the perspective of the Tavaran who are not in the UEE is a big thing that'll probably play into the narrative of Star Citizen going forward. So.
Yeah. Oh, it's exciting. It's absolutely exciting. And with that, Paul, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for staying with us for an hour and a half worth of the podcast. Your insights, experience, going into the lore, man, greatly appreciated. Plus, just being a good person. I can tell that you're an amazing individual, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really,
thank you for having me on. It's very good to go on to these places, especially since I like seeing other parts of the Star Citizen community that I may not have interacted with. So hopefully,
absolutely,
say hello. So.
Well, you're welcome at any point. I'm sure there'll be a lore moment in the future that we're going to want you on in your insights. So thank you.
Just let me know.
Absolutely, yeah, and likewise. So for everybody else. Again, thank you for joining us on YouTube. You've seen us live. This will be available for replay, obviously on YouTube. It's going to be live Friday morning on podcast on all major podcasting platforms. Paul, if anybody's interested in diving into the Astro Historian, the Astro Pub, where can we find you?
You can find me at youtube.com/theastrohistorian or youtube.com/theastropub live. And I do live streams at twitch.tv/theastropub, which is I usually go live Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So
yeah, that's great, man. That's great. Yeah, if you haven't followed him, please do. His content is freaking amazing. CIG is using it, like we heard earlier in the call. So please go follow him. And with that, I hope this finds everybody well. Have a great rest of your week. You've been listening to Beyond the Verse, Star Citizen podcast with your host, Solus. Join our in-game organization, Sol Provision, by applying at www.robertspaceindustriescom/orgs/provision. You can get involved in the conversation with your questions, comments, or emotional outbursts by emailing us at starcitizenbtv@gmail.com. Watch us live on Thursdays, 8 p.m. Central at youtube.com/@StarCitizenBTV, and follow the conversation over at Twitter and Instagram, both at /StarCitizenBTV. Once again, thank you for joining us. We hope this finds you well. Until next time, safe travels as you traverse beyond the verse.